1 in the manual and page 3 in the PowerPoint. The United States is the most generous country on the face of the planet if you look at real dollars. In 2017 Giving USA, which shares 2016 calendar year-end numbers, the United States gave away $390 billion, and that is more than some countries' entire GDP. And this is money that we're giving away. So in that way, we're the most generous country to face the planet. I think the last time I looked, it was that our household average giveaway is still only down around 1.6%. So that is that gives us some room to grow. It means there's more money to be had. Interesting little fun fact to know and tell, that religious households have a higher average giveaway of slightly over 2%. So, you can see that in the formation of the religious formation, you get a little bit more of an emphasis on giving than in strictly civic formation. But typically, as we say, we get it through the mother's milk, in the United States, from both civic and religious traditions that giving is good, and it's good for the country, for the community, and even in religious settings we can develop this sense that it's good for rich human living. It's good to give, blessed to give rather than receive, that type of formation. So all of these, we are inheritors of these traditions, of these philanthropic formations. And as professionals within the, in our roles, we are guardians of those traditions as well. So if anybody is going to speak to our organizations and our communities, it's going to be people like us who kind of communicate what we inherit, what we perpetuate, things like that. So it's very important. And there are some things that it is in fact our responsibility as being within advancement in development to communicate to the chiefs of our organizations, to the people, the staff people, to the families of students and the students themselves, to kind of help, while we got them, inculcate the importance of giving, not only for the future of your organization, but for the betterment and community lift, within our country, our community, things like that. One important strategic takeaway that we can get from looking at Giving USA is the fact that individuals give away about 80 cents out of the philanthropic dollar if you look at live individuals who give 72% and dead individuals via bequests who give 8%. So if we want to look at our strategies in capital campaign major gift fundraising, we need to know that we need to spend more money, more time, and more energy on individuals, because that's where the money is. That's the source of the giveaway. So that forms our strategies for moving into major gift fundraising. Okay, and there is foundation giving, and sometimes foundations are created by individuals as kind of a pass-through for giving. But a lot of times foundations we'll give to you, the more public ones and big ones we'll give to you after you've done a good job with your individuals, with your alums, with your community. You raise money from the inside out and the top down. We'll get to that later. But anyway, that gives you a sense of how we use this information and how that forms our strategies. I don't know if you have past giving history, but I'll just give you some numbers. The high water mark was in 2007 with $317 billion given away, and then the recession the next year, it went from 314 to 299. So that was a real hit, and it took us all 5 years to get back up past 314 again. So the recession was a real deal. Now we learned a lot, like we learned a lot from Katrina. We learned a lot from the recession. Some new normals, were formulated, and we'll share those. Create a mental file pool. Successful fundraising is both institutionally driven and it is donor driven. There are two different dynamics at play that formulate what successful fundraising is. And I recall when I was at Ole Miss in economics that there was this graph and this grid of demand and supply, okay? And if you recall, I was just thinking of this walking my dog last night. Why is this angle like this and why is this angle like this? Because the more quantity you have of something, that's going to decrease demand. The more quantity decreases the demand and decreases the money. If you have something unique and it's going to be something of value and it's going to be a high dollar. But the more quantity you have, the less dollar value that thing will represent. Okay. Now that's demand. On supply, what you have is that the fewer of $1 items that you have, the less money you get. But if you have a million $1 items to sell, then you're going to be able to get more money as the quantity increases. Okay, so those are kind of the basic dynamics of demand and supply. And what economists look for is that point intersection in the middle, and that's called profit maximization. Okay. Now I share this with you because this is kind of a metaphor of a cross dynamic that we see in fundraising. Fundraising is both institutionally driven and it is donor driven. Okay. And the question becomes, what are the things that occur in the life of a nonprofit that help us plot this institutionally driven line? And what I'm going to suggest is that is the process of strategic planning. In strategic planning, we go through things like who we are, we review that, we review our mission, our raison d'etre, our reason for being, and we think about, this is the way we worded our mission earlier, is this still us? Or have we evolved, have we grown in such a way that we need to shift the wording in such a way that we have a more precise description of our mission? Okay, so that's one thing you look at in strategic planning, is who we are, what is our mission? Do we need to redefine? And then we also look at our vision for our organization. A vision is where we're going. And there are a million different ways that you can move from your mission in this direction, in this direction, in this direction. But it's important that you define where you want to be when you grow up, and kind of plot your way there. So we look at missions, and visions. And then, let me draw it for you. Mission is the heart of your organization. Vision is where you're going. And then, we leaders of the organization plot short-term, intermediate term, and long-term goals / objectives. Short-term is that which can be done this next year. Intermediate term is typically 2 to 5 years in orientation. Long-term is 5+ years. Okay? And goals is a word that we typically associate with financial goals. Objectives are words that we typically associate with programmatic objectives. They're the same thing. These are things we need to accomplish. Goals and objectives in the short, intermediate, and long term. And then we plot our strategies, both our programmatic strategies in the short, intermediate term, and long term. And what are our resource development strategies, our advancement strategies? In the short term, we have a strategy. It is typically called annual giving. And that's what we do year in, year out to raise the money to hit our annual goal, annual fund goal. On the intermediate term, we typically have capital campaigns or major gift efforts to raise the money to hit our, in your case, maybe a $15 million goal, something like that, okay? And typically, capital campaigns, a lot of times you're raising money for buildings. A building is not something you can do in a year. It's going to take you about 2 to 5 years to raise the money and to build the building and things like that. So you typically find buildings and things like that within a short term, intermediate term goal. And then you have, as a strategy in your long-term goals, you have something called legacy giving, okay? And a lot of times legacy giving, your goal is to, and typically legacy giving, by the way, legacy giving, you don't have dollar goals in legacy giving. You may have goals on the number of identified expectancies, but it's just nothing you can kind of metric and measure and predict as to how much your legacy gift goal is going to be. But you can have a number of predictions of identified expectancies, and through a number of years you can kind of determine how many realized expectancies we can kind of think about over the course of a year, 2 years, 5 years, things like that. Most long-term goals, monies find themselves in endowments. Okay, and a lot of times, what do endowments do? They institutionalize programs. You got a pool of money, derivative income is pushed toward a certain program, things like that. So that's kind of the nature of who we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. Yesterday, last 2 days in Fundraising 101, I suggested that you have a vision that is measurable in such a way as you know when you're going to get there. It shouldn't be like our vision of our organization is to bring in the kingdom of God. You're not going to do that, on your budget, So please don't have, that kind of illusory vision for yourselves. But have it measurable so you know when you get there. So you know when you've arrived. Gave the example of my United Nations Association. A better vision for us was not world peace. It was more than our $5 million budget could afford. But we could have as a goal something like we want to be the largest foreign policy membership organization in the United States. And we could do certain things in the short and intermediate and long term to get there, So anyway, I know y'all would know what your missions are. What would you say best articulates your vision? I mean, you may already know it by heart, but what is the children's home's vision?
What's your thing?
And then you can still build up to something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have a.
So we need help.
Now,
Work on that.
could it be that you want to be the biggest children's home in Louisiana? I mean, is that something that, I mean, it may be
Or
that
serve a certain number of children, or,
Yeah.
some kind of a measurable.
yeah, or that you are maybe the most comprehensive service, organization for children in the state.
Let's get closer.
Okay.
But you'd have to have some measurable metrics of some
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
to know that.
Yeah, please set it up that way. And of course, you would need to know and compare how many services do we have versus the competition. Well, in some ways, the Clarion University gives the foundation something to sell.
Exactly.
They're our case, the foundation's case
Right.
for support. So the university's vision is going to be different from the foundation's, because you're here mission to raise money for the for the university. So the foundation's vision could be, we're going to be the 500-pound gorilla in our area. We're going to raise more money than anybody else in this area. Or it could be that we're going to establish foundational best practices as compared to the other universities within our system. And you have to measure those best practices.
I
What
think
are you
it's
gonna
more
measure?
of the latter
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
That trying to, be the best that we can. Now, interestingly, most alums, most people don't differentiate between the foundation and the university. People in town will say, "Oh, you're working at the university now."
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
not exactly.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. But there is a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely.
A yin and a yang. Okay. I was thinking about this yesterday. I didn't mention it, but we were talking about boards and how different, board constitutions and things like that, and different job responsibilities. The board of the universities, it seems the complexion should be different, because what is the foundation there to do? It's raise money. So what is are board members of the foundation there to do? It should be really skewed toward wealth, and skewed toward one thing, and that's raising money. They are there to raise money. So it may be that you have a little bit more of a lax posture towards giving and getting, and a much more aggressive posture toward getting and getting money on the foundation board.
And that's the way we are.
Yeah,
We're more
yeah.
of a corporate, as you mentioned yesterday, corporate entity.
Yeah.
Whereas our university trustees are certainly a politically appointed group. But sadly, we don't have good giving from our trustees and boards.
Neither on the foundation or the.
Certainly not on the trustee side, and in my opinion, not enough on the foundation side.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's a growing edge, as we said in seminary. That's a growing edge.
I'll use that.
Yeah. Okay. So we know who we are. We know where we're going. We know how we're going to get there. We know where the capital campaign fits, within the universe of our organization.
Visions change. I know mission statements.
Yes.
We always talk about. We've always had the same mission, but
Yeah.
I think we have something. I think we do have something in our policies and procedures. Some kind of vision. I don't remember what it is though.
Yeah. Visions do change. Missions change ever incrementally, and visions change a lot of times with a different leader. You know, even though the mission
Oh, yeah.
is, you know,
Right.
the same, a different leader,
Different
a
approach
new
to get
president
there.
may come in and,
Yeah.
you know, and Moses is going this way, and, you know, Cain and Abel are going two different ways, different leadership styles and whatever.
Okay.
And the mission is like, we're going north, and the vision is, we'll be in the North Pole by the end of the year.
That's a good word.
Okay.
Mission is, we go north,
Mission is the heart, and this is who we are.
and the vision would be, we'll be in the North Pole by the end of the year.
Okay.
That would be the vision.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
The
One,
specific.
one is a destination and one is a
Or direction.
process, you know, or something like that. Okay. So, successful fundraising is institutionally driven, and that is typically defined by a strategic planning process. That's our roadmap for our institution. And it is donor driven on back to the axis. And what do we do that helps us plot the donor-driven axis? And what I'm going to suggest is we do things like feasibility studies. And it's that process where we get a sense, a bead on what the donor-driven dynamics are, okay? And so Gina's going to go more into detail about feasibility studies. But the feasibility studies, the spirit is we're going to offer as a preliminary case, this is not a cram down, this is our preliminary case that emerges from our strategic planning process. This is the best foot forward as defined by our leaders and our administration. G, prospective donor, what do you think? That's the spirit of the feasibility study. And they will tell you what's hot and what's not about what, you know, your leadership has done with your strategic plan. And the donors will fund accordingly as to giving to what's hot and not giving to what's not. And it is the interplay of this institutionally driven dynamic and donor-driven dynamic that helps us plot this midpoint called philanthropic maximization, okay? And in a lot of ways, we are ultimately, we are very dependent on the donor-driven dynamic. No money, no mission. No bucks, no Buck Rogers, you know. So that's what's helping to float the boat. Particularly as what, state funding is cut back? Yeah.
And it affects all of us.
It does. A lot of times, capital campaigns will come and swing in and out of the life of your organization every 7, 10, 12 years, depending on your needs, on your vision of yourself, on your mission, things like that. So even though you can have a capital campaign that is over a period of time, it'll have a specific goal, an amount that you raise for. It has a beginning and an end. You can still have an ongoing major gift program where we're mining for the big dollars outside of the life of the capital campaign. You know, you should always be in a major gift fundraising mode, even as you are not living within the life of a capital campaign. Okay? And a lot of the I can remember reading Fundraising Management by Kathleen Kelly. I remember it is that thick as a tome. She hates consultants. She's out of Florida. But her orientation is, and of course her bias is universities because that's what she knows. You know, she is saying that, you know, we're moving away from capital campaigns and more toward an ongoing major gift fundraising dynamic. And I'm just thinking, okay, you may have a PhD, but that is really more out of true for a corporate-sized nonprofit. And the smaller startups or program-sized nonprofits, you know, they really count on, you know, a ramping up of volunteers, having a capital campaign, and then raising the money, and then lying fallow for a little bit. That is more of a model for the mid-sized nonprofits, and ongoing major gift programs may be more appropriate for the larger corporate dynamics.
How does that affect the larger demand? The larger corporate structure's cost to raise $1, is it consistently higher without the capital campaign cycles?
If you have an ongoing major gift fundraising program, I do think that it's going to kind of come out in the wash. You may have capital campaigns, sporadic, you know, things, and then you get you take a 5-year rolling average of that. It's going to come out about the same. It's going to come out about the same.
Yeah.
Burns out the donors, burns out the volunteers. But here's the thing: if you're in not really a university, but a multiversity with different colleges, it may be that, you know, you had a focus for a capital campaign over here that was more programmatic, and then you can shift to another major gift capital campaign for athletics. I mean, you know, it may be that you have different constituencies, and you mobilize for this 5 to 7 years, and then you can move into another constituency. That would be the only excuse for moving immediately from one to the next to the next to the next, without lying fallow for a year or two and giving some people some time to reload.
Right.
Now, you can spend some time after a campaign preparing, thinking, making plans for your next campaign, but as far as letting your constituency know that soon as
Sure, behind the scenes situation
yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
saying,
You're in one or you're
in 5,
preparing
okay,
for
our
it.
next one's gonna start in 5 years, and here's what we're looking at. But that's a complete behind the curtain.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.